Okay, so we're back to this image. And what I want to do now is, we did the previously with the QuickMask and all that. We used the polygonal tool to do a selection. And we were able to select this backgammon area here using just a polygonal tool and then using some basic QuickMask tools. So that was one way to select. Another one, which has a lot more control, because if you, let's say we wanted to select this this kind of I don't know, goodies holder, whatever this is, this glorified ashtray maybe or something, and if I wanted to use that same tool, the Polygonal Lasso, how would you select this? I mean, we can go in and click all the way around, but it's such an organic shape that the shape itself might not be the the best. So if I hit Q, it's pretty good I guess at this resolution. It's not too bad, but it's a lot of clicks. It's a lot of clicks going through that. So one of the other ways that I like to select, and it's kind of twofold benefits. Not only it's easier to select as far as because it has these organic shapes, but later on I'll show you about the path. How can we set some highlights for this, and the way to do that is with the pen tool. So with the pen tool, which is sitting right below this the burn tool and above the text, is very similar to Illustrator. Almost identical. It's got this one has, I think, one benefit that Illustrator maybe hasn't caught up with yet, but it's generally the same. It's like 99% the same as Illustrator, and I think we're all familiar with pulling the handles, clicking these these shapes here, holding down the option to set a corner handle. All right, you can try that. So like where these two organic or rounded, I should say, areas meet, I can extend the handle, break it by holding down either Alt or Option. So once you hold down Option, you can see the handle breaks, and now I'm able to select or click on the next handle. So this takes a little bit of practice. I've been doing this for quite some time, so I'm pretty familiar with the break handle and how far out the handle is supposed to go. Another thing too, while you're in the tool, you can also hold down the Command key, and you can reposition a point that you just laid down by clicking on this, on the center control point and the Command key. You release the Command key, and then you can just continue on. So maybe you just didn't quite, nail down exactly where it's supposed to be, and you wanted to adjust it. So you can do it that way. All right, so you just can keep going. Maybe I want to put that over here. Wherever there's more detail, it requires more handles. Put another handle where there's a lot of detail, a lot of surface changes. If there's not a lot of surface changes, it's always best to use the least amount of handles as possible. Here there's two. So just be careful with that. Don't put too many handles, because then it kind of goes back to the Polygonal Lasso tool. It's kind of the same. You kind of want just some quick selections here. So maybe I can just, whoops, you can undo. So I want to do that. Hold down the Option key. Bring that handle back, and then you finish it off with completing that. And then, so now we're left with this, with this path. And if you go over here to the Paths palette, here it says Work Path. This work path will, as soon as you start another path, what will happen is this work path will delete, or the new path will replace this path. So you may want to save this. If you're going to use this again, I would save it. And you could just go in and either make a duplicate of it right next to the trash can down here. There's a little plus sign. You can actually, you have to bring it down to that drag it down to that. And now, instead of work path, now it says path. Now the next one that you bring in, before it's selected, if I'm outside of that, and go back into the pen tool, I guess now it maintains it inside. But the important thing is that it's saved within that. And because it's saved, you can go in and edit it and fine tune it. So the same, kind of the same criteria as that you have in, learned in Illustrator, or maybe even like Procreate and stuff. It's just some basic handles that you can go in and fine tune. All right, so you can just keep fine tuning this so that it's an exact selection. Okay. All right, this is the one that really needed it, so I'm going to bring this handle a little bit shorter. And remember, handles don't have to have the exact same length. You can have longer handle on one side, so it has more influence on the path. The other side is shorter, has less influence, so maybe there's a little more detail in there. Okay, so I'll do that. And like I said, sometimes this just takes some practice in doing. Lettering helps a lot. If you do some lettering, definitely helps a lot in just trace over your initials or something just to practice, and you'll really kind of get the handle of it, right? Pun intended. All right, so that's a pretty good path. Okay, so now with the path in place, now we can make it a selection. So this is where I can stay within this path palette, right? So the path palette here. And if you don't see your path palette, you can always go to Window and click on Paths. So, sometimes Photoshop comes up with, now they have their new workspaces and stuff, so you might be in another workspace that doesn't have paths available. I usually just put it on Essentials, just leave it there, and it's pretty much has all the palettes I need here on the side, or the tabs. All right, so now now with paths, I'm in my paths tab. I have my path selected. See down here at the bottom, and I want to bring this up so it's not so far. Right below this, see it's got the little dotted line here. So this represents the selection. So if you hover over that, you can see that it says load path as selection. So if I click on this, it converted, the path stays there, but it converted that path into a selection. And if I hit the Q key, which from the previous video, QuickMask, I can see that it is fully selected. I think I hit everything. It's pretty close to what I need, and then I can go in and just make whatever adjustments I need for this. Maybe you want to remove it, do something else to it. Maybe you want to change the color of it or something. You can go in, and with this selected, you can go in and say, hue saturation or something. You may want to colorize it, give it a tint. So you hit colorize, pick the color you want, and there you go. So now this acts kind of like a tinting thing. If you don't hit colorize, you can adjust the color or whatever available color and change that with the hue saturation. But you can do anything with this. This now that because it is a selection, and right now this selection turned into a mask for hue saturation. If you want to do another layer, layer mask here, or adjustment layer, you'd have to load in that selection again, and you could just command click this mask. It's already there. So that's the selection. So you can always load in a selection just by hitting the command key, which I believe is the alt key or the control key on the PC. I'm not sure exactly, but play around with it. The icon will change. So you see how it's got a little hand for repositioning. If you're over that mask and you hold down the command, you can see that it changes into a hand with a selection over it. So once you click on that, it'll turn it into a selection. So there, I clicked on this other one, and it turned that into a selection. And you can always verify really quick what's selected and what's not by clicking on the Q. Now I can see this is what's selected. And then maybe I want to go into curves this time. And maybe I want to change the curves, kind of make it look more like titanium maybe, or something, or like a deep pewter color or something like that, right? So it's a quick way to set paths to selections. And one other thing about paths too, we have the advantage of, because we have the paths, we can do other things with the path. So let me turn off these other two adjustment layers. So I'll just throw them away. So those adjustment layers went away. And let's say I want a highlight across here. We can use a combination of a couple things. So the path, and let me make a new path here. So let's say I want more of a highlight going across to differentiate these two. So I'm going to go into path, and I'm just going to put a quick, just a 2-point path here. Kind of follows the rim of this bowl. Okay, so there it is. And now with this selection, see, if you just make it a selection, what it'll try to do is close up this path. So notice that it's not a closed path. And right now, because this is selected, just this segment, it's only looking at this area here. It's not looking at the entire, bowl here, because if that was selected, let me select that, and I click on that, then it selects that selection and not what's in here. So you just have to be careful what you have selected. So if you just select this and click on the load selection, it'll select this curve, but if I hit the Q key, what it did was it just tried to close that up. So, but that's not what I want. What I want is a selection right on this edge. Okay, so I'm going to deselect. And this is where like another tool can come into play here. So I'm going to hit the Q. So that's my selection there. I'm going to undo that. Okay, so I'm going to load in the brush, and with this select, so what it's going to do now, because this segment of the path is selected and I have my brush on, what it's going to do is it's going to what's called stroke this path. And exactly, so instead of filling it in with something, if I click in this tool here, which is called stroke path with brush, see that it does exactly that. It sets the stroke, and remember the stroke is the width of the of the path, and the fill is something else. It'll fill it in, basically trying to close it up like we did before. But I want a smaller brush. I don't want such a thick brush on that rim. So I'm going to click my open brackets to make that smaller, or you can control click to set the pixel width of that brush. All right, so that's about right. So with this path selected, I go here to stroke the path, and there we go. So now it's set. And remember that we're still in QuickMask mode. So when I hit the Q key, there's a selection. Now I'm going to hide everything. Sometimes, like I said, you have to hit the Command H twice. Now I'm going to get a wider brush. So the brush is on. I'm going to control click to get the quick brush parameters here, and I'm going to go with a slightly wider, maybe for this resolution, maybe about 40. Really soft here. My color is white. I'm going to turn down the opacity because I don't want it to be so opaque here. And I'm going to just remind you what the selection is. So this is the selection, and now by hiding it, I'm going to go over it a few times. So because only that is selected, See, that's how I'm just going over it with a very wide brush, and now I'm able to set this highlight here, running through the whole thing, the rim here. So really good control over the, what's being, what am I doing that, that I need to, set a highlight in a certain spot. So I'm going to do another quick one. Maybe this table edge. Maybe this table edge needs a little bit more of a highlight. So I'll just set a new path here. I'll hit the P key to set the path. I'm just going to make one path. I'm going to go to my brush, hit B for brush. I know that 2 is a good width for that. Maybe slightly harder here. And I hit the Q. I'm going to deselect first. Hit the Q key. Make sure that it's painting red. Now I can go in and click on the stroke width. And sometimes you may have to do it a couple times if you really want it to kind of take. So if you have, like here I had my opacity set low. So you may have to do it, maybe a couple times. So it'll just keep going over it and over it again. All right, so that's the selection. Remember, the red represents the selection. So it's red just in that one line. Now I can hit the Q key again to get back to the selection. I hide everything. I get a larger brush. This time I'm going to go a little bit bigger. The hardness 0 because I want it to be really soft. And now I can go in and just, with the Wacom tablet, just smoothly kind of go over this little area. So I'm only getting this area here just because I don't want it to be, I don't want that highlight to just go all the way across this way, and I don't want it to hit the very edge. Right, so I'm just kind of hitting it with a soft brush there. So let's try putting a little bit over on this side. All right, so that's the path. And setting stroke to path on a QuickMask to build up, let's say, some highlights that may be either tough to do, by hand, being, you'd have to have a pretty good eye and pretty good hand control to, or maybe a ruler right up against your tablet or your Wacom to get such a straight line. All right, but practice that. It's a really good way of working, and you can get some really subtlety to not only to your selections, but to your highlights as they go back onto your product. Okay, thank you.